Hey, welcome to my third video of my series of how to configure Nagios on a Ubuntu server machine. This video will be dedicated to monitor a Windows machine. So we will install an agent in the Windows machine and then we will configure different things to monitor. By example, the CPU usage, the memory usage, and the disk space. In the machine that we want to monitor, we have to download and install the NCPA agent. To download that NCPA agent, go to this website, nagios.org/ncpa, and we have a download button. This computer is a Windows host. I will choose the Windows version for this NCPA agent. Once it's downloaded, just open your file browser and go to the download folder. We will install it. Of course, Windows will say that it is an unknown software by Microsoft. So we will click on add additional information and execute it anyway. I will accept this. Click on next and I agree. And here it asks to enter a token. The token is like a password for the agent. The same password will have to be configured in the Nagios server too. In my case, I will put that password. In your case, enter the password you want, but you will have to use the same one on the Nagios server. Default settings will be used for the rest of the configuration, but if you have several network interfaces, you can specify which interface you want the service to listen to. To do that, enter the IP address of your network interface, and you can also modify the network port. So I click on next, and here too we will leave it with the default config. The installation is completed. It's already finished for the part to install the agent on the host we want to monitor. We will go now on the Nagios server to create a config for this host. But before we need a plugin, and that plugin is not present in the Ubuntu repository. We will have to download the check NCPA plugin. Use the wget command to download a file from a URL. I will put that URL in the video description. We will download this file and we will move it to our Nagios plugins directory. Files can be moved using the mv command. Of course, I forgot to put sudo to have the administrator rights, because administrator right is required to move a file on this folder. We will list the plugins directory content. And we see our new file is here. We will change our current directory with the cd command to the one containing the plugin. I will list the directory again to be sure it's the right directory. We will add the execution rights to the plugin that we have downloaded. This check NCPA file is a Python script. Normally, if you did my previous tutorial and you did it on Ubuntu server 22.04, Python will already be installed. Otherwise, you have to install the Python 3 package. We will also change the file ownership for this file and do the same things to the group owner. So I want to have Nagios user in the Nagios group as owner of this file. We will list the file just to verify its permission. It's now Nagios the owner of this file. We also see that the execution right have been added. So everything is okay. I will also modify this script file just to tell our script where is Python. Because if we leave it like that, our Ubuntu system will not recognize this Python path. So we need to change the first line to this one. To know its path, I use which Python 3 command. And it gave me the command path. Here we see that it is the same as returned by this which command. We will do a test to see if the Nagios agent answers to my Nagios server. I'm going to go for a quick tour on my Windows machine, the one we want to monitor, because I want to know what is its IP address. Okay, so it is 10.0.0.124. So back to our Nagios server. I will run this command to test it before adding it to the Nagios configuration file. Here is the full path of our check NCPA command. The -h is to define the host IP address we want to send a NCPA request. So I put my Windows host IP address. The -t is the token. So as I said earlier, it must be the same one that I put when I installed the NCPA agent. -p is the network port. And the uppercase M is the request we want to make to the NCPA agent. In this example, we are just asking for the agent version. But let's say that I want the CPU usage. It's something else that I will need to write in this option. But I will show you an example later. I'll just leave it like that for now. I will press enter. We will see if it is okay. So yes, it is. The agent has responded with its version number. So on this second example, it's the same thing as the previous one. The same command, the same host IP, same token. But as you can see, the -m option is different. It's memory/virtual instead of system agent version. And here is the parameter we define to be in warning and critical state. I will execute that command. The NCPA agent returned me that everything is okay about memory. The answer is okay because its currently used memory is at 27% and it's below 50 and 80%. Now, if you ask yourself, how can we put it on the Nagios console? It's very simple. First of all, we need to create a command on the Nagios command.cfg file. Here we see the command we create in the second Nagios video that I made. Below this one, we will add a new command for the check NCPA. So that's what it looked like. I will paste it in the video description. I save and close the config file. Just for information, here is our directory that contains the object that we configure in Nagios. Example, our hosts, our services, our command, etc. Most of this file came by default, but this two file is the two one I created in the second video. We will create a new file, the same thing as I did for my Linux host, but I will call this new file Windows host. So here the full path for this new config file. I will specify all my Windows hosts on this file. I have a configuration already made and I will copy and paste it here. In this new configuration file at the top section, I'll put a setting template for my Windows host. Each host using this template will receive parameters defined on it. On the first line, I specified the template name. In the second line, I specify which time period I want to monitor my Windows host. On the check interval, you have to specify how much minutes you want between each check. In this case, it's 10 minutes. The retry interval is the check interval if the answer of my agent gives me something else than OK on his check. On this example, it will start to check every minute if the service state is in warning, critical, or unknown state. At the max check attempt, it is set to 3 here. It means if after 3 check on a non-OK state, it will send an alert if email alert is configured. The notification period is the period time we want to receive email alert if problem occur. By example, I can configure that I would only want to receive an email for my Windows host if an error occur during the work hours. So in this case, I will not receive email alert if something occur during the night or the weekend. This time period settings is defined somewhere in a Nagios config file. It is a default setting when we install the Nagios server. My next Nagios video will talk about it and I will show you how to create a new time period. The interval notification indicate how many minutes you will like to receive an email again when our host is a non-OK state. So here it's 120 minutes. So by example, if my CPU usage is too high, I will receive a first email alert and 2 hours later I will receive a second one and a third one and a fourth one, blah blah blah. The other template setting that I put here will be explained in my fourth Nagios video when I will talk about email alerts. After this host template setting, we will define our Windows host. In my case, I only have a Windows machine to monitor, but let's say you have 10 hosts. It's here that you will have to enter them. You will have to put your 10 defined host line followed by the parameters for each one. In my parameters, I have the host name. This is the name that will appear in the Nagios console. The IP address is the IP address. Seriously? If you have a DNS server and your Nagios server use that DNS server, you can use the name instead of the IP. It's very useful. If the host IP address change, your Nagios server will still be able to join it and monitor it. For the check command, I use the command that I created a few minutes ago, and it is the same option that I used previously during my tests. The token, the port, etc. I will not explain it again. And here we also have the request we want to do under agent. The host group line is the setting where we specify which host group we want the host to be in. I decide to create a host group named Windows Host. I will define it later, you will see. Then I will add all my Windows hosts on this group. And I will use that host group later when I will configure my services to specify which host group I want to monitor these services. And on the last line is to tell which setting template we want to use. It's the famous one we create at the top of this file. So my host will receive all settings set on the template. If a settings is defined twice, by example on the template and on the host definition, the parameters specified on the host will have priority. Here is a summary of my config file. We will make another file with the services definition for our Windows host. It's really the same model that I used when I made my second Nagios video when I show you how to monitor the Linux host. I made a config file to define my host and another one to define my services. Of course, the file did not exist. It's a new file, an empty file. And again, I will copy paste an existing config that I made, and it will be in the video description too. So once again, I will configure a template setting for my services as I did for my host. Instead of specify all this parameter for each services, it will be set on the template. Then each services using that template will receive these settings. So the parameter I want to set up on my template is very similar to the one I configured for my host. I will not read each line again. I will just summarize each services. The first service I configure in this config is to verify the CPU usage. On the check command line, it's the command we want to execute. Again, it is the check _ NCPA command, followed by the token and the NCPA agent network port. So it's really the same settings that we saw previously when I set up the host. Only the -m option is different. On this example is to receive the CPU percentage. We also have the criteria for warning and critical state. To monitor the memory usage, it's the same thing, but you just have to change the -m like this one. On this example, the service will be in a warning state if memory usage is above 50%, and it will be in a critical state if it is above 80%. This service description is explicit to what it means. The service description is what it will be shown on the Nagios console. The third service is to monitor the process number. So if in our Windows machine there are more than 150 processes, it will be in a warning state. And if it's more than 200, it will be in critical state. So it will be read in the Nagios console. All this beautiful config will be in the video description. Don't worry about it. After I set up my host and services, a very important thing to do is to add this new config file in the main Nagios config file. Here we see the two files created on my previous video to configure my Linux host. Below we have a section for our Windows machine. So I will paste my config here. This two line is to specify my two new config files created some minutes ago. Like in my previous Nagios video, before restarting the service, I will validate my configuration with this tool to see if there are errors or things that I forgot to define but that I used in the config. So the number of warning and error must be at 0. In this case, there is no problem. I can restart my Nagios service and my machine will not explode. It can be done with this command. Okay, I return on my internet browser from my other machine to test my change. I will go back to my Nagios console. To do that, type the IP address of your Nagios server. In my case, it's 10.0.0.33 and followed by /Nagios4 to access the Nagios web console. Enter the username and the password. It is the username and the password that we set on the first Nagios video. And now, in theory, if I go to the host page, our new Windows machine will appear next to its brother, the Ubuntu machine, the one that I configure in the second video on my Nagios video series. Yes. And if we go to the services page, we will see our new services below. The CPU usage has already been checked, but not the other services. We have to let them time. But we can also force the next checkup for these two services. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other service. Then after forcing it to check, I always have to wait a few seconds. That's it. And as a bonus, I will show you how to monitor the disk space for the C drive. And you will be able to copy and adjust this service to monitor your other disk drive in Windows if you have one. Example, if your data is on a D drive. So that will be done with the check NCPA command again. For the -M option, we will specify that we want disk/logical/C colon. On this config, if the used disk space is above 90%, this service will be in a warning state. And if it is above 95%, it will be in a critical state. And here in my tests, it returned me okay. We see that it also displayed the currently used space, in this example 19%. We're going to do a little test. For the warning option, I'm going to put it at 20%. So it will be okay too. Yes. Then we will try it at 19%. Now it should be in a warning state. And yes, it is. And just for information, let's say that our parameters was if the use space is above 15%, we want a warning, and above 18%, we want a critical state. The command should return critical. Yes. So it was just an example, just to show you this option. Okay, it's just the same things in Nagios. We have to put our warning and critical setting, and then the NCPA agent will return to the Nagios server. I'm okay, I'm warning, I'm critical, etc. So now I will add this disk space monitor on my Nagios config file. I open the Windows Service config file again, and I will add the config I want to. As service description, you can put C drive disk space. For the other parameter, we already talked about it. I will skip the presentation. And as earlier, we will verify the config with these tools. Always do it after a modification. 0 warning, 0 error. We are now happy, very happy. And we can restart our service. And I return to the Nagios console. I'm going to click on the services page again and see if that new service is there. Oh, it is in the pending state. I can wait for the next check, or I can force it. I will force it. So blah blah blah, commit, I wait a few seconds, services. I did not wait long enough. Oh yeah, all is okay. The console shows us what was returned on the last check. So this Windows OS used only 19% of its C disk space. When it will be above 90%, it will cry and will be yellow in the Nagios console. Well, that's all for this Nagios video. Thank you for listening. It will be a pleasure for me to make other video if you need it. And I wish you a nice day. Bye 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 bye.